Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Marie Lu, and she's here today to share with us her new book, Wildcard. Now, Marie is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Young Elite series, as well as a blockbuster bestseller Legend series. She graduated from the University of Southern California and jumped into the video game industry as an artist. Now a full-time writer, she spends her spare time reading, drawing, and playing games. So let's welcome to the show, Marie Lu.
Thank you so much for having me, Marianne.
What a pleasure it is to have you here, and I'm so glad that we're spending this time to talk about not just your new book, Wildcard, but also all the great things that you've been doing, because you're a busy writer.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, it's good to be busy. So I'm very lucky and grateful to get to do what I do. Yeah.
Well, and before we get started to, kind of diving into your book a little bit, because we're not going to talk about too much, because it is a novel. We want people to pick up their own copy of Wildcard. What kind of started you on the path of writing?
Well, I started writing when I was very young. My parents and I moved to the States from China when I was 5, and so my mom would give me this assignment to go to school every day and write down English words that I didn't know and put them into sentences so that I could learn. And from that process, I just kind of, once I knew enough of the language to know what to do with it, I realized that I just really enjoy the process of putting little stories together for myself. So I started stapling together little booklets, and, I drew little comics and wrote little short stories for myself from a pretty early age. It was just always very fun for me.
I can see where that's such a great inspiration, putting those words together. What a brilliant thing for your mom to suggest.
I'm glad she did. Yeah, I think it helped a lot, and I think early on she was really afraid that I wasn't going to learn English quickly enough, but very quickly they realized that I was losing track of my Chinese. So, it's like when kids are 5, they just soak up whatever's around them. So, I realized early on that I was losing my Chinese.
Oh, was there a point where they were working with you in regards to your Chinese as well? Because, you don't want to lose any heritage.
Yeah, I mean, they sent me to Chinese school on Saturdays, which is where you take language classes in Chinese, and you can take other classes as well, and just try to keep me immersed as much as they could in it. But it's hard when you live in a country that doesn't speak that language. So I can speak and understand Chinese okay, but people can kind of tell that I have an American accent. When I go overseas, it's very obvious that I'm not from there. So I can't read or write. So I'm illiterate in Chinese. But otherwise, I can at least communicate a little bit, which I'm glad for.
That's pretty exciting. I love hearing how their writing career starts, and it's usually from inspiration from other people or something that drives us. And so when you started, because I know that you've also kind of dabbled in video games, as an artist.
Yeah.
So how did you go from doing the video games to the writing that you're doing, or is it something that's just all combined?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it was part of the fact that I really enjoyed all creative pursuits when I was little. I love to draw. I love to write. I love to play video games, and I love to read, and that was basically my entire childhood. And I didn't really know that any of those things were actual career options, so I didn't know that you could go into a field like video games. I don't know where I thought video games came from. Obviously, somebody's making them, but it didn't occur to me that you could do that as a career. So I went off to university and thought that I was going to be a lawyer. So I was ready to go to law school and everything. And it wasn't until my senior year of college that I kind of had a feeling that law school wasn't going to be for me, but I didn't know what to do otherwise with with my life. And I remember walking around campus just feeling very sorry for myself. Like, what am I going to do? And I walked past this kiosk that had a bulletin from Walt Disney Interactive Studios, which is their game division. And it was a call for interns asking, do you like to play video games and do you like to draw? We're looking for interns to come up with new video game ideas for Disney for six months in a think tank. And I remember looking at that and just thinking, like, that sounds like the coolest job I've ever heard. I didn't even know you could do that, and make money doing that. So I remember applying for that and getting in and just dived kind of serendipitously into video games for 5 or 6 years and, really enjoyed my time there before I became a full-time writer.
Wow. And it's interesting. I have a friend that works for Disney too, and usually when people are there, they stay there forever.
Yeah. I have a lot of friends who are still there, yeah. And it's just, it was a really fun atmosphere to work in, so I can totally see why they would stay.
Well, and what did your parents think? Because when you transitioned from an attorney to now you're working for Disney Interactive Studios, they're probably going, what is she doing? Or were they really supportive with your career?
Yeah. I mean, they were definitely surprised. At first, I think they were, like me, they didn't think that, the video game industry was an actual industry that you could work in, so it never really occurred to them to even think that I would go in such a direction. So I remember calling my mom when I heard about the internship, and I was like, hey, I'm going to turn down law school. I'm going to go, work at this internship in the video game industry for a while just to see where it goes. And I think my mom was like, okay. But she also was like, if this is what you really want to do, we're not going to stop you from doing that. Especially if you're going to be miserable in law school. So they were very supportive, and I'm very grateful for that, especially since it was a field that they didn't understand, but they trusted me enough to believe that I knew what I was doing. So I really appreciate that from them. And now they seem pretty happy with the fact that I'm pursuing, writing and gaming. So it all worked out okay.
Well, we can tell that you're pursuing your passion because you are a New York Times bestselling author. So, the writing portion obviously is something that you're very passionate about. And, it's interesting how you've, kind of tied, the gaming industry a little bit in with the Warcross series that you've done.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a series that I had been wanting to write for a while, and I always knew that I was going to find some way of putting video games or my experience in the industry into a novel of some kind. I just didn't quite know what that story was until Warcross came along. So I had a lot of fun writing this series. I would say it's probably the most fun that I've had writing a series.
Now, did you have like an idea of where you were going to go with the Warcross series? Did you kind of have it mapped out, or is it something that just kind of evolved with time?
I am kind of a pantser writer, as in, like, I write by the seat of my pants, and I don't follow my outlines very well. I would very much like to be a more organized writer and outline my stories a little bit more, but every time I write an outline, I always end up by chapter 4, I've completely veered off the track and don't know where I am anymore. And I've come to accept that that's part of my process. But having said that, Warcross is a fairly short series for me. It's only 2 books, so it's a duology, and Wildcard is the finale of the 2-book series. And so I did kind of know where it was going to end, and I knew most of the big points that I had to hit. But I didn't actually know a lot about how I was going to get there, which characters would live or die through the series. A lot of that stuff comes up as I'm writing the series and surprises me. So hopefully that means that it's surprising for my readers too. But it does mean that my first drafts are incredibly chaotic and very messy and many things will change as I go along.
Well, that probably also means that and you can tell by the way that you write, because you're a very vivid writer, is that the characters come alive. As opposed to, you can feel these characters really coming. They're just kind of writing their own story, and it's through you.
Well, thank you so much. I do enjoy writing characters, probably more than anything else. They are the first thing that come to me when I start building a world. So I don't really know a lot about the book when I start writing, but I do tend to write pretty extensive character profiles for all of my series before I start.
And do those ever change? Do you end up adding another character or changing the profile a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it happens all the time. It's part of the whole pantsing thing for me. And sometimes halfway through, I will change main characters even. That didn't happen for Warcross, but it happened for one of my earlier series, The Young Elites, which follows a girl who becomes a villain, and it chronicles her downfall into how that happens to her. And she wasn't the original protagonist for the story. It was someone else, and she was the villain of the story, and I wrote maybe like half of the first book before I realized that I was writing about the wrong person, so I had to throw all that away and start all over again with the villain as the main character of that story. So it can be kind of chaotic again with my first drafts. A lot tends to change even with the characters.
Well, and so let's talk about the two books a little bit, because with Warcross, you have it. That's a very different style than Wildcard. And people kind of notice, I've seen tons of reviews. Everyone's loving both books, but one of the things they talk about is how different the two styles are.
Yeah, it was something that I knew going into the series that was going to happen. Warcross, the first book, is very much how I feel about technology. So I think that the two books turn out that way as kind of the way that I think about technology today. So the first book is incredibly cheerful and colorful and full of, oh, this is so fun, this game is great, everyone's having a great time. Look at all the amazing things that technology is doing. We've got virtual reality, and it's completely transformed our lives for the better. And it's all of these. It's really exciting, and everyone's happy. And I wanted to capture that really optimistic, energetic feeling that I get when I see, where we're going with technology. And then with Wildcard, the tone is, like you said, is completely different. It's much darker. It's much more sinister. The main character, Amika, starts to dive into the darker side of what this game and this technology means for the world, the ramifications of always pursuing what we can do as opposed to what we should do, and the fact that morality is always kind of two steps behind innovation and technology. And so Wildcard kind of tackles all of that and the consequences of that kind of behavior, and is more of the cautionary tale of the two of them. And I wanted the series to kind of round out still in an optimistic way, because I think overall I believe that technology benefits us for the better, and it saves a lot of lives, and ultimately I think we're better off for it. But at the same time, I always, it keeps me up at night thinking about where we're going with our creations and whether it's a good thing what we're doing. Like, are we changing the world for the better, or are we just making it different? And I think all of those thoughts went into the divide for the series.
Well, I love how you have that outlined, and you can see it in both books. Just how that difference in approach from visually seeing it the world in one way and then in another, because we kind of are on this precipice where we can look at, like, what are we doing with AI, and how is that really helping? And there are so many great things that can be done with it. And again, are we asking the right questions?
Exactly. Yeah, it was weird writing a series that is very near future science fiction, because a lot of it was changing in real time as I was writing. So I was constantly fighting to keep pace with it, and new articles would come out all the time about what was happening, and the landscape just changes so quickly from day to day. It's like you said, it's exciting, but it's kind of unsettling as well.
Was there anything when you were doing your research for both books that kind of surprised you, or because you kind of know your stuff when it comes to, when we talk about the video game industry and your writing?
Yeah, there were a lot of things that surprised me as I went, especially with this series, because everything was just so current and fast moving in the real world. So I still constantly get readers who send me articles where they're like, "Oh my God, have you seen this? This is so and so is inventing contact lenses that can layer augmented reality over our eyes, just like Warcross." Or so it's all it's surreal watching it happen at the same time. Like, I remember reading, this was after we had finished a couple rounds of the drafts for Warcross, the first book, and my editor sent me an article, and she was like, "Have you seen this? Elon Musk is creating something called a Neuralink," which is the same name of the device and the system that Warcross uses in my book. She's like, "Elon Musk is creating the Neuralink, and it's a brain-computer interface. It's a chip that they install in your brain, and you can access the internet and see it in your, floating before your eyes." And I was like, "Oh my God, do we need to, change our name?" Like, I was easy to sue us. It was just really weird and surreal to see that kind of stuff happening. Like, none of the science fiction in Warcross and Wildcard are fiction at all. It's all happening now. So yeah, I was constantly surprised by the new technology and new science that was happening in every issue of Wired that I read, every article on TechCrunch that I was reading as I was writing the series over the span of a couple of years. It was just mind-boggling seeing how quickly is all happening.
Well, and it must be really interesting for the readers as well, and I'm sure you're getting that feedback where they're saying, "Wow, I'm reading your book and your books, and here all these things are, talked about, or they're starting to discuss how these things are possible, kind of like with the Neuralink."
Yeah, it's fun reading reader feedback on this series, just because of that parallel. And I think that part of the reason that I wanted to write it for young adults is because young people are, today's young generation is experiencing this in a way that, my generation and older generations can't even fathom. I can't even imagine what it must be like right now to be a teenager growing up in the middle of all of this rapid change, and for them to think that this is just a part of normal life. I remember the world before the internet, I remember what that was like, and today's generation they've never lived in a time when, we didn't have the internet or social media for that matter, which just blows my mind. I remember I was at a middle school once giving a talk, and I don't remember what I was saying, but somehow the topic about phones came up, and I made the gesture of, you put up your thumb and your pinky to make a phone gesture next to your face, and they didn't know what I was doing because they've never seen a phone like that. For them, it's always been the iPhone. I was like, "Oh my God, what's happening? This is a totally different generation." I find it really interesting thinking about, how this is for our younger generation. It must be just mind-boggling to grow up with all of this, thinking it's completely normal.
Oh, and that's funny because I've heard about, how kids, if they see a payphone, they're not sure what you do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Same things, but I've never thought about making that gesture because that's what,
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's old school now.
Yeah, I know. It's vintage now.
Yeah, so it must have been just so difficult to keep up with everything that was coming up with the new changes in science, and when we talk about video games and all that, all those things that were changing and happening in real time, and to stay like 10 paces above it when you're like, in front of it when you're writing this book.
Yeah, it was hard.
Oh my goodness. Well, why for Wildcard? I mean, we've got Warcross that's been out, and people love it. It's a New York Times bestselling, book. We've got Wildcard as well. Why don't you share a little bit with us? I mean, we've been talking about it. We don't want to get into it too much, but what would you like to share about the book?
Yeah, thank you so much. And let's see. I'm going to try to stay away from spoilers, but like for Warcross, the basic idea for it is set pretty much in present day. So it's very near future science fiction. And it's about this game called Warcross that has just taken the world by storm. Literally everyone plays this game. And the creator of this game is this young man named Hideo Tanaka. He made it when he was 13 years old, along with the technology that goes with it, which is something that allows you to layer augmented reality and virtual reality over the real world. And he invented it when he was, 13. By the time the story opens, he's 21 and is a global celebrity. And the story follows an 18-year-old girl named Amika Chen, who is living in New York City on her own. She works as a bounty hunter, hunting down people who are gambling illegally on the game. But she's kind of down on her luck, it doesn't pay very well, and she's on her own. She's very young. She's about to get evicted from her apartment. She's got $13 in her bank account, so things are not looking great for Amika. She has always idolized Hideo, so she's interested in hacking and she's interested in tech, and she loves the game. But, she's getting kind of desperate, so out of desperation, she hacks into the game in an attempt to make some money and accidentally hacks herself into the International Warcross Championships, which is watched by, like, the entire world. So the next morning, she's on every newspaper, and every article is like, who is Amika Chen? Who is this random person who just hopped into the games? And she gets a phone call that kind of changes her life. It's from Hideo himself, and he says, I have a job offer for you. Are you interested? And from there, her life just spirals completely out of control. She is flown to Tokyo. She starts to delve into this game and this job that she's been hired for, hunting down a hacker. And as the story goes on, she gets swept up in both the glitz and glamour of this celebrity world of technology and the game, but at the same time starts to see the darkness and the danger underneath. And so the first book is very much the colorful, the fun, the wow factor of Warcross. And the second book chronicles her journey into uncovering all of the, dangerous, shady things that go on behind the scenes, much in the same way that, our internet on the surface looks like this amazing place of knowledge, and underneath we have, the dark web where all kinds of nefarious things happen. So Amika's journey is kind of split into those two arcs, and she kind of has to figure out where she stands on a lot of moral issues. So that's kind of a basic rundown of this series. I had a lot of fun writing her for both of the books, but I hope readers enjoy both of them.
Oh, I'm sure that they will. My goodness, Marie. I mean, it's such a great run. And I know people are going to be sad that this is the Wildcard is the end of this series, but who knows? Maybe they'll have this as a movie, you know?
I hope so. That would be really fun. We'll see what happens in the future.
Well, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Yeah, I am pretty active on Instagram and on Twitter. Those are my two main social media stops. So readers can usually find me on Instagram at Marie Lu, the writer, where I'm constantly posting Insta stories and Instagrams, and on Twitter, where I am happy to answer questions whenever I can for them. And my Twitter handle there is Marie_Lu. So, yeah, I hope I hear from some of the readers who are listening. That would be really fun.
Well, Wildcard is available now. People can pick it up for the holidays just in time. Give that special someone book. If not just this book, I'd pick up both books and have those as well. Marie, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for such a fun conversation. This was a great time.
Well, thank you, Marie. It has been such a pleasure to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, Wildcard. Now, Wildcard's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and, of course, all indie bookstores. Again, if you'd like to connect with Marie, learn more about her other books and just about her writing, feel free to drop by her website, marielubooks.com. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.